Hi guys, my name is Kelsey. Welcome to my channel at VeniLegiAmavi. It's nice to see you. It's been a while. I believe last time I saw you I promised I was going to start posting more often. That was maybe January. It's April now officially as of yesterday. So that's my bad, I guess. I just, things got super busy. I recently took my hair out of several different types of braids, as I'm sure you would have seen on my Instagram if you're following me there. I had a lot of different braids going on, so that's why my hair is like weirdly two different textures. Whatever. Anyway, so for today's video, I just kind of wanted to have like more of a relaxed chat about books, where like I'm still gonna talk about some books with you. I'm just gonna like doodle in my bullet journal while we chat, because I don't know, I can do both at the same time, and it's kind of, I don't know, I think it'll be relaxing, for both of us. It'll just be like a nice little thing. Yeah. Anyway, so the last time that we chatted, we were talking about that's what it was. I told you guys that I had read the worst book ever. So here it is. So we read it for a book club book. So it's like, it's a hard sci-fi. It's not really my style, but it is Neal Stephenson's Anthem, whatever. So the hardcover, like underneath the dust cover, which I have since lost, the hardcover is actually really nice. Like I like the look of the book, and like the heft is nice until you open it and try to read it. This book was bad. Here's the thing. It wasn't all bad. It could have been readable. Full disclosure, the first 50 pages of this book are the slowest thing I've ever read in my entire life. Like, there is one scene in the first 50 pages that matters. And that is just a cute, cheeky little scene between the only interesting character in the entire book and the main character, about setting some fires and stuff. But that's not really relevant. Like, I don't really want to spoil it for you, but this entire book is just, I believe it's like 1,000 pages. And I don't have anything against long books, like, yeah, so in this copy that I have is 935 pages. So my book club was meeting to read this book together. My book club was meeting to read this book together, or to like talk about this book. And I was about 400 pages in the day before, but I hated this book so much that I was like, I have to finish reading it. I have to finish this book so that I can show up to book club and tell everyone why it's wrong and awful, because several people in our group actually really enjoyed it. However, I think it's actual trash. Like, it's the worst. So, let's put that down. Maybe it wasn't a good idea to try to draw it while I was doing this book, because this book isn't very relaxing to me. It actually just like really gets me. But I'm actually going to be comparing it to another book that we read more recently. Let me just shuffle around my work area here. All right, so, yeah, Anthem was like a hard sci-fi. It was dense as hell. The entire first, like when I kind of first started reading it, the guy who pitched it really told us that, the first 50 pages are exceptionally boring. They read like 700 pages, and the last 700 pages read like 300. Like, basically he said like, it was like, yeah, he basically said that the last half is such an easy, quick read, like, because it's so engaging. I did not find that. I found that the book was dense and heavy and misogynistic. I found that the entire concept of their society and this culture they built, because it takes place in a very different world from ours, this entire society that he built in Anthem, that Neal Stephenson built, is really interesting. Objectively, it's an interesting world and it's an interesting concept. The basic premise is that there are like monasteries, and it follows a society of monks who dedicate their life to like math, basically. It's math monks, which is a really cool concept, especially the way that they kind of have some of the have some of the discussions about it. Like, it really is engaging and interesting for brief little glimpses. However, none of the characters were interesting. There was only one, and if Leo wasn't in the scene, I'm sorry, it's not worth reading. Leo's in, like, I don't know, maybe 12 scenes in 1,000 pages. To me, Leo was really, like, the only character who mattered, you know? And the main character had nothing. And really, what really got me is there's this whole, look at this page. I'm too, okay. There's this entire culture that he's built that's really designed to be something totally unlike our culture, you know, and it's interesting, and I love the idea behind it, and the concept is cool. However, Neil Stephenson is such an obvious example of that stereotype that men cannot write female characters. Like, it's like he doesn't even know what, like, instead of trying to give them any personality, he just, like, throws them on a page. Like, they're just flat. Every single woman in that book is the flattest character. The only character that even has an attempt of a personality is one who the main character, I guess, is close with, but, like, not really. But anyway, the only female character that has any personality is at one point described in this totally different society, totally different culture, completely different world. He describes her as, she talks about, like, quantum physics the way that other girls talk about shoes, you know, or like something ridiculous and stupid like that. Like, was that really necessary in a society where they don't talk about shopping or, like, malls or any other stereotypes that you would look at in this world? And even the concept of that stereotype that's a whole other bucket of worms, you know, like, but just the concept that, you know, you've got, like, this world and you can make it anything you want, and you're still going to draw from, like, bad stereotypes from our culture? Really? That's what you're gonna choose to do here? Ugh. Anyway, so basically, I don't really trust Neil Stephenson as an author anymore, and I'm not sure if, like I remember I was in a creative writing class when I first learned about, like, the kind of concept of trusting an author, and I remember not, like, really getting it, but I kind of do now, you know? Like, I just, like, it makes sense to me, that concept, and I just don't, like, trust him. Certainly not with another freaking 1,000 pages. I've heard that Snow Crash is worth a read, but I refuse because I think that he's garbage. That's what it comes down to. Like, the poor writing and, like, the ignorance when it came to writing female characters in this book, along, like that was a big deal to me. Pair that along with the fact that he really, like, isn't telling you a story here. He's, to borrow a term that someone else used to describe a book in my social group once, it basically just felt like he was jerking off in his own world and being like, you know, oh, look at this world, like, isn't it great, I'm so cool, like, the entire thing. Like, it follows, like, kind of a Lord of the Rings style adventure where, like, the adventure is all about from getting to point A to point B, except there's nothing interesting that happens, really. I mean, there's, like, one or two moments of action, but even then, like, the whole thing is really not, I mean, it's, first off, doesn't hold a candle to Lord of the Rings. I should be shamed for that actual comparison, because it's got a slight adventure aspect, but it's not even really, no, I just hated it. I hated it so much. Just, there were good moments, aside from the fact that it was, like, less engaging than reading an actual textbook. It was like a textbook of this fictional world that happened to have, I guess, characters? I mean, named people in it. I wouldn't really describe them as characters because they would have to have, like, characteristics and personality for that. What I'm getting at, some of the cultural norms in their society are really interesting, and I think would actually, I would like to see more of in our society. Like they have these discourses where it's very normalized to just sit down and kind of debate, but also just educate each other. And it's lovely. And like there were like, it was an interesting book in that he did like try to actually, oh, I missed an N. Just like I need an eraser. You know, there were moments that were interesting. Things like that. Things like the author did actually like try to include an aspect of actual education for the readers, which I appreciate, because I do think that they brought up, like, they had some interesting concepts, and I liked that, you know. I thought that he found a way to explain them relatively simply, and there were some things that genuinely were like interesting, good ideas. The concept of the math monks and like them being like split up into kind of different studies was really interesting. It's just the execution of the actual storytelling portion was horrendous, and it wasn't like an actual story to me. So that's kind of my assessment of Neil Stephenson's Anthem. Honestly, even the ending, I found it to be pretty rushed, a little bit confusing, not very, like, even though the ending is very much like the climax and there's a lot going on, I didn't really give a shit, which is problematic for a 1,000-page book. And I mean, maybe that's just because I read it all, like, the second half in a day. But the whole thing was just kind of meh, you know? Like even the part that was supposed to be really good and really engaging and really interesting, I was very meh about, which is bad because the first half was actively awful. And the characters are, like, again, there's one interesting character. To this day, I can tell you one character's name, and that's Leo. He's the only character I remember. He's the only one who I thought was interesting. I couldn't tell you the main character's name, even while I was reading the book. Like it was in there, and if you caught me with the book in front of me, I could probably find it and tell you, but, like, he wasn't interesting. I had no reason to remember his name. Like, the whole thing was just, no. However, we also read a book recently. Look at, I've got one word done. Ridiculous. This was maybe a bad idea. Whatever, it's fine. We also read a book recently called The Canticle of Lebowitz. Canticle of Lebowitz is a pretty old book. And it was it's kind of like 3 distinct parts. The first part was actually, it was slow to get into, but it had some really interesting concepts and some really cool moments. And, you know, like, as you moved forward, it was really slow burn. And as you moved forward with the character, you really got to really enjoy him and become invested in him. However, the rest of the book was really very, very slow. The characters that you meet later on are not nearly as engaging, and the whole thing was very reminiscent of Neil Stephenson's Anthem. I mean, it was also monks. It was also, it was also like a monkhood dedicated to knowledge. So, like, there were definitely, like, similarities. One of the issues, at least here's the thing. It was a monastery, and I assume they don't really talk about it. I assume it was an all-male monastery because there's three female characters in the entire book, and all 3 of them show up in the very last part. So, and, like, one of them's name was just, like, female reporter. That's the only thing that she's known as. But whatever, you know, like, whatever. I'll let it go for now. But because of reasons like, you know, those, not supplies, schedule. Because of reasons like those, it really reminded me quite a lot of Anthem. And when we showed up at book club to talk about that book, I mentioned as much. And, you know, at first I was pretty hard on it because while I found parts interesting, as a whole it was largely fairly dull and fairly dry, like as a reading kind of. I read it, my friend sent me a PDF, so I actually don't have a physical copy this time, but you know, it was fairly dry, and so I didn't love that. But, and like one of my main complaints is that it didn't feel like, much like Anthem, it didn't feel like a book that was written for a reader. It felt like a book that was written for the author. So, the interesting thing is, that was actually the case with Canticle. Excuse me, that was actually the case with Canticle. Canticle was written by the author to help him cope with some of the war crimes that he actually committed, or some of like the crimes that he committed during the wars, or during the war. So when I learned that, I actually softened quite a bit towards Canticle, and I like it much more as a piece now that I realize that, like, I can't criticize him for not writing the book, like not having a book that seemed to be written to an audience, because it wasn't supposed to be. It was very much a coping mechanism for him. And like, there's an interview where someone's talking to him, and he actually says, like, he got like 2/3 or like almost near the end of the book before he was like, wait a minute, this is very reminiscent of like this place that I was and these things that I did. And he actually says, like, wow, I kind of realized that I was writing about my past experiences, or about the experiences of like the people that I had wronged and like the places that I had wronged and stuff like that. So as a piece of literature, I respect the Canticle of Lebowitz much, much more than I respect Anthem, because Anthem was just like, it was just bad. But at least Canticle was like, first off, it did have more engaging moments. It was much shorter, and the way that the parts were written actually made it a little bit easier, because it was such a dry read, because you kind of get through one and take a breather and then start the other, and it was very much kind of like reset your brain, you know, like gave you a different, gave you a little break, basically. But there were still issues I had with it, of course. It did, after all, remind me of Anthem. But yeah, so, you know, like, it is really interesting though, and like, it's, I think, worth keeping in mind that the purpose of a book, like why a book was written and like what the author's intent with a book is when they write it, is actually very much important, I think, and like very relevant. And really, I want to get into a habit of going and like seeing if I can research books and like figure out questions like that before I read them in the future, because it really did change Canticle as a book for me. And yeah, so anyway, the worst book that I had ever read, Anthem by Neil Stephenson, and Canticle was not great, but I respect a lot more as a piece of literature, even if I'll probably never reread it again. Well, to be fair, I might reread part 1 in the future, and part 3 was decent. Like, the second half of part 3 was interesting, but the second part was not great for me. But anyway, so this is how much I've got done on my bullet journal. I'm going to continue working on this bullet journal as we talk about the next couple books in the next videos. Yeah, I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching, and I hope that was relatively spoiler-free. If you want to hate read these books, let me know what you think. Or if you've already read them and you have any opinion on them, let me know, because a lot of people in our book club, like, our book club was very split, like half and half. Like, people either loved or hated these books. So it was really interesting. But yeah, let me know what you think, because I fucking hated them. Canticle less so. Again, you know, we've already talked about it. Okay, that's it. Thanks. Bye.